And welcome to the show, everyone. I'm Joe DeHoyos. I'm the host of Beyond the Woodline. My trusty, talented, and beautiful co-host Shannon, she's traveling right now, so I don't think she'll be able to join. She might pop her head in, but I don't have anybody to pick on today, so I'm disappointed about that. But my guest today is Dr. William Lester. How you doing, Mr. Lester?
Hey, how you doing, man? Glad to be with you.
Hey, thanks a lot for joining, man. I really appreciate it. Before came over, we were talking about your
Mhm,
timeline. And
mhm.
it's something that that you said you have some people that were fans of that, and I'm definitely a fan of that. Is that something that that era? Like I said, it's kind of a vintage. Is that something you're a fan of?
Yeah, as I got older, I started kind of having this special fondness for certainly things that I remember,
Right,
and then a little bit earlier than that, because a lot of the things that I remember were just there before I got there.
right,
I remember getting a color TV, for example, and it sounds funny now, but that was a huge change.
right,
And all of these things, the cars and the clothes and the music and the movies, there was just a thing that fascinates me even to this day. And so I try to bring that to that timeline.
right,
And like you said, you like it, other people like it, because I think it's the same thing. People like tapping into memories.
right. Yeah, it
Yeah,
kind of brings on that nostalgia feeling, and
exactly.
so some of the stuff that you post, especially like a lot of Star Trek stuff,
Hmm.
it just brings me so much to my childhood, and I'm always thinking about how Star Trek itself wasn't on TV very long, but it's this
No,
huge phenomenon, and people think it was like 2 or 3 years it was on TV.
had 3 seasons of a
Yeah,
network run. But here's the thing, though, it immediately went into syndication.
right.
Because if you remember, didn't it seem like when you're 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, it was always on,
It's always on. Yeah, yeah.
right?
you
Yeah.
you would have thought it was long as I Love Lucy.
I tell you, when you brought it up, you rekindled a memory, because it must have been, I don't know, late 70s. And it's, Star Trek is on, Star Trek is on. Me and my dad are watching it. And he's still saying, I wonder when they're going to do a new season.
Yeah,
And it's 10 years after it stopped running, right?
right.
And I'm like, Dad, I don't think that no, they're not doing that. You know. Um, but he was still waiting.
That's pretty cool, man. Yeah, Star Trek, man. That's
Yeah.
that's. I like that better than Star Wars. And some people don't like that, but I like it better than Star Wars.
I think I agree with you, and I've never had any ambivalence about it.
Yeah,
When Star Wars came out, I did all that. I did the whole thing. And they've got their own universe. But there's something about Star Trek that I can kind of explain it, and then the rest I just can't, because it's subjective.
right.
But there's something about it that just holds me to this day. And I think it's in the like high class of science fiction.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm a Star Wars fan. I like Star Wars, but of
Yeah.
course, Star
Yeah.
Trek's better. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Oh,
like it. Yeah. I mean, it's like, if you imagine, like, Star Wars, science fiction has like levels
right.
in terms of the writing and the ideas of the stories. I just think Star Trek is just so far up here in those areas.
Right. Yeah.
Star Wars is a lot of fun. It's a lot of action, adventure. Everything's blowing up. Everything's, there's a lot of,
Right.
yeah, there's
A lot of stormtroopers missing. Yeah.
steel troopers, right? And so that has a place,
Yeah.
but it's not Star Trek.
Yeah.
It's not Star Trek.
Yeah. Speaking of one of the things I like about Star Wars is the first one.
Mhm.
Was it the very first one?
A New Hope.
A New Hope, yeah, where R2D2 and CP3 cross the hall and they're shooting, and the lasers are going by. That's
Right.
for whatever reason, that's just one of my favorite scenes of that.
Yeah,
Whole,
it's just things going everywhere.
yeah,
That's right.
yeah,
Right. Like a shootout. Yeah.
yeah, But
Yeah.
hold on, we got a special guest right here coming on. So
All right. Oh, Michael.
Yeah, Mr. Mike. Hey, Mike, you want to turn your speaker off? You get an echo.
Hello.
Hey.
Little difficulties. Give me 1 second here. My hey guys, how's it going? 1 second here. How's everybody doing?
It's not a Star Wars
Got
poster.
my background going on.
Yeah, there you go.
You there?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah, I don't know if we're gonna better make this work, Mike.
Actually, a
You're getting
Harry
that echo
Potter
from your
poster.
side, I think.
I got locked up for that one time.
I think he's got a little delay going.
All right.
Yeah. I'm just gonna remove
Okay.
them.
Yeah.
We'll go back to us. But yeah, man. One of the reasons why I brought you on, you post so much good stuff about cryptids, just all different variety, man. There's just so many out there. What are your thoughts on the cryptid field in general?
Well, I think that I kind of almost liked it before it was a field.
Okay.
Okay. Because now it's a field, it's an industry, right? It's even into the entertainment industry. And I know this is kind of what goes along with the territory, but I became deeply interested even before this term was being used.
Yeah.
Okay. So like back in the early 70s, and I was a little kid, and my mom would bring me these books because she was a reading specialist, and it would be books like real monsters and lake monsters and Sasquatch and this thing. And I read this thing and it said the abominable snowman, and I'm like, what on earth is that? Because I had no consciousness of any of this stuff. I thought monsters were like Godzilla,
Yeah,
and Rodan. That's what and when I saw this, I'm deeply fascinated. And so I read all the paperbacks and all the magazines. My dad took me to, remember that movie with Peter Graves, the documentary, Mysterious Monsters? Me and my dad saw that at the theater, 1975.
Right.
Yeah, we did. And so I just kind of became interested, and I think that there are things that are real. There are things that are kind of like questionable. There's things I can't give any hide nor hair explanation to. But I think that the field needs the attention of the established scientific community.
Right.
And it's very difficult to do. And I think, for example, like with UFOs, we're getting closer to that because of obviously what's happened right lately. But we need that same kind of attention paid to cryptid situations.
Right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there's not a lot of true scientists that are out in the field.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of just enthusiasts, really, and people who use the term researcher, which I guess is okay because there's nobody else really doing it.
Right.
And every now and then you'll find out that a team does have like some kind of like biologist on their team, which is great. Someone who has an anthropology background, which is great, but that's very few and far between. There's a team, I think it's in Washington State. They actually have marine biologists on their team, which is great too.
Wow.
Yeah. So
it's too few.
Right.
You get one here, one there. I think wasn't that show, I don't know if it's still on, Finding Bigfoot.
Right.
Wasn't the woman on the show a biologist?
Yeah, I believe she was. Yeah.
Okay. And then there was another show, just like it's and the other thing, they're making a show.
Right.
It's not the same as an actual research project.
Right.
They're out there for a finite amount of time to get enough material, to get enough footage, to get enough things to make an interesting episode.
Right.
And so the kind of research that it would take a lot of funding.
Right.
And that's where you run out of gas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because most people are just weekend warriors like myself. And even at that, I can't afford to go out every weekend.
Right. I mean, because you got to burn gas. You got to all the resources of whatever.
It's not an expensive hobby, but it certainly adds up.
Right.
Camping gear, food, firewood, stuff like that. Gas, like you said.
Well, because it's like, I mean, you're literally doing hiking, camping,
right.
Researching, Bigfoot researching or cryptid researching. And, you can't afford to just take a camping trip every weekend. Just take out the Bigfoot part.
Right.
You can't afford to go on a camping trip every weekend. You fill up the cooler. Right.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. And ideally, if you are going to do this research, the best time to do it is during the week. So now you got to take time off of work to do it also. Right.
Which is you're taking money out of your pocket because you're missing work, and it's a circular thing. So that's kind of like what I think about the field. I think that there's a lot of good, honest people out there who are doing a lot of work out of pocket. A lot of times they may not have the background to put the right kind of research protocols into place, but that's really all we have right now. And so, we've got to use what we have, when we have it, where we've got it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess part of those protocols are collecting evidence correctly.
Yes.
Not contaminating it. That's probably a big deal about it.
And then the chain of custody.
Right.
Because you get it, you got to show it to your friend Bob, and Bob shows it to Sally, and Sally shows it to her cousin, and by the time you get it back, there's 4 or 5 pieces missing, and it's
everyone's got their DNA on it,
right?
And so because even at that, getting stuff tested isn't cheap either.
And I was talking. I was doing an interview day before yesterday, and we were talking about the DNA aspect of Bigfoot in particular. And it's this, like you said, number one, it's very expensive. So, even if you take it to a lab, it's probably $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 to do that. And then once you do that, it's going to come back. If you're lucky, it'll come back as primate.
Right.
At worst, it'll come back like inconclusive, or may come back as human.
Right.
But the problem is the lab doesn't have Bigfoot DNA in their database. Yeah. So what do they have to compare it to? They're going to compare it to a bear. Yeah. They're going to compare it to a gorilla. All the stuff in their database.
Right.
And we know that Bigfoot's not a gorilla.
Yeah.
We know it's not a chimpanzee. It's not an orangutan. It's not a baboon. And it's certainly not a bear. So even if you could afford the testing, it's not going to come back and say Sasquatch.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So that's why that's why you have people who are like, we got to have a dead one.
Yeah. I was going to ask you that too. Do you think that's what it's going to take, a body or at least a nice sized chunk of one?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I try to be careful because, I'm not advocating, this kind of wild, out of control bounty on a Bigfoot.
Right.
Because that's what you'll get. Everybody that can squeeze a trigger will be out there, Yeah. But scientifically, we need a dead one.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully someone can come across one that died of natural causes.
Right. We need one, and we need it to be studied. And, we have all the facilities that are necessary to study this animal if we have one. Right. So this isn't some kind of thing where we're looking at it, we can't figure it out. We don't have to back engineer this.
Yeah.
Right. Because if it's dead, then it's got a heart, it's got lungs, it's got blood, it's got tissue, it's got all the things. If it's dead, it used to be alive.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
And all the muscles and tendons and fingernails and all that's good stuff that we need to prove that this is an actual, at one time, a living being.
I'm really interested in what it might be, or even if it's one thing, because if you look at like down here they have this thing called the skunk ape,
right,
or the swamp ape, skunk ape, and then you have other kind of variations in different, even out in your part of the country,
right.
And then a different kind of variation up in the Pacific Northwest, and so I'm wondering if these are just variations, geographic variations, regionally adapted, of some kind of creature that perhaps existed like pre-Ice Age that we just don't know about.
Or at least acknowledge.
Or, exactly, acknowledge. The right people don't know.
Right.
Right. People, because once that trickles into like the universities,
Mm-hmm.
and the anthropology departments and the zoology, see, you can't control that.
Right.
Because you got the guy at Stanford, you can't control the guy at Notre Dame, and you can't control the guy at the University of Chicago, you can't control the guy at Princeton. We need to get it in there.
Yeah. Speaking of, there's a college, it's South Texas University. It's actually a pretty respectable college here in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
It's they're right up there with Texas A&M as far as their departments go.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine's girlfriend was going there, and she had told him that one of her professors that told her that he saw a skull one time that he believed that it was from a Bigfoot.
Okay.
He didn't say where he saw the skull from, but he was telling the class about the skull that he had seen one time. That he told him flat out he thought it was from a Bigfoot.
And he didn't get fired instantly?
No, he didn't. I guess not.
Because I'm just like, I used to, I talk about it a little bit, but I worked in like in university settings,
mm-hmm.
and I have gotten in trouble more than one time.
Really?
About this topic. And the funny thing is that they all know that it's true.
Right.
The type of people I work with, they all know that it's real.
Right.
But it's like, because like when they're in their offices and they're having their little, buddy departmental meetings, and then they go out to the bar, they all talk, oh yes, we know, Gigantopithecus and this, and they talk about all these things. And then you see them on the History Channel and they go, there's no evidence.
Oh wow.
I'm telling you. One or two academics kind of slip through, like Jeff Meldrum,
right?
And he's gone through a lot of scrutiny, persecution. Yeah. So it's still, if you have academic credentials and you talk about these subjects seriously, it starts to make you somewhat of a pariah. Yeah. So
why do you think that is? Why do you think people talk about it openly? Is it because of the funding, or the people doing the funding, rather?
I think, yes, that's part of it. I think that first you create a stigma. Okay, first you create a stigma, and the stigma scares everybody. So you have a lot of really good researchers, a lot of good zoologists, a lot of good anthropologists, a lot of good every other kind of ologist who simply won't talk about it because of the stigma and what it might lead to. And you're right, funding. You don't want to jeopardize getting your tenure.
Right.
You don't want to jeopardize getting your work published in the peer review publications. So the stigma is a really good way to control the people who could actually find the information that we want.
Right.
But they're just not going to. They're just not going to. I think the same thing happens in things in the world of physics and engineering. I think the same stigmatic pressure is applied to them, and they won't talk about UFOs.
Right.
And if you notice, as a dovetail, if you notice with this UFO thing that's kind of blown up, if you've noticed, the media is now talking about it seriously. It's all on 60 Minutes. It's all over CNN, everywhere. It's everywhere. The politicians are talking about it, like over, the Navy guys.
Yeah, the high-ranking officials in the military.
The Pentagon.
Right.
The Pentagon. The last group, the fourth group, is not in on it yet. The scientists. Have you noticed that everybody else, the politicians, the military people, the high-up military people, and the media are all in? But the scientific community, by and large, isn't. This tells me that they don't want to have to deal with the first thing, which is a big "I told you so," because that's going to be the first thing.
Right.
Like, we told you, and they've got no answer for that. And so I believe the mainstream scientific community is going to come into that issue kicking and screaming.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yeah. Because the Navy has scientists, the Navy has engineers, the Navy has physicists. And so it's not just some admiral.
Right.
It's the Navy.
Yes, the Navy.
Right, Yeah.
So we kind of touched on the subject about them being acknowledged, the cryptids anyway. And when I go down to the Samuelson Forest, where I do a lot of my research, I guess you can call that, the Samuelson Forest is thick. I mean, you can't see 10 feet off trail.
Wow.
You could literally hide a T-Rex back there and you'll never see it. So what are you thinking about people who say, well, I've been hunting all these years and I've never seen a Bigfoot or I've never seen any kind of cryptid? What kind of an answer is a good answer for these people?
Okay.
To say that, how can one of these things hide from us? And like I said, you can put a T-Rex back in these forests, but of course a T-Rex is probably going to make
It's 25 feet tall. Well, yes. Okay. So the people who say that don't have a real perspective on the outdoors.
Okay.
And I was talking to my wife about this just yesterday because a chemist, I think it was a chemist, but he published a study about he created a projected analysis on the Bigfoot population in the Appalachian mountain chain.
Right.
And he laid out all of his criteria. And one of the points he made was this. If you're driving down the highway at 60 miles an hour, you can cover about 5 miles in 5 minutes. And it doesn't really mean anything to you. If you're in the forest and you have to walk 5 miles, it might take you 2.5, 3 hours.
Right.
You have a much different perspective on the expanse, the dimension, the scope, and the grandeur of forest and woodlands in the United States.
Right.
Most people don't have that perspective. They have a little patch of woods in their subdivision.
Right.
And they think that that's what it is. And there's millions of square acres.
Right.
And you're talking about an animal that is highly intelligent, just low enough numbers so that they're hardly ever seen, but high enough to keep a breeding population going. So they're going to be rare. And if you see one, it's like hitting a Powerball. Right? And, plus on top of it, they know how to avoid humans.
Right.
And the final thing is, the truth is, you have independent researchers like yourself, and you have people making TV shows. Other than that, nobody's out there looking for it.
Right.
That's the other thing. People assume that there's teams of highly funded research programs sweeping the nation to find that's not what's happening.
Right.
So if you're not looking for it, don't ask me why nobody's found it.
Right. Yeah. And like I tell people all the time, so a lot of these hunters have probably walked right by them and never seen them.
Right.
They probably see the hunters more times than they'll ever see the Bigfoot. You know.
I grew up hunting into my early 20s. And keep in mind, this is Georgia. Okay. And if it's one thing we've got,
it's forest. Yeah, it's forest. Yeah.
Right.
And swamps.
Swamps, forest, everything. I saw one dead deer.
Right.
In the 80s. And there's millions of deer in Georgia. Millions. Yeah. I saw one dead deer, like 1984. I never saw a dead bear. I never saw a dead fox.
Right.
I never saw, and you know that there's tons of those out there.
Yeah, yeah. Hogs,
raccoons, coyotes, all of these things. Mm-hmm. Because the forest consumes the dead.
Right.
It just recycles everything quickly. Even a large animal, a 7-8 foot animal, it's going to be consumed by the forest just like a black bear.
Right. Yeah. I was dating someone on the outside of town. It's called Magnolia, Texas. Mm-hmm. So I was staying over there for a few days. We saw a deer get hit, right? Mm-hmm. And the vultures came. And in 3 days, it was nothing but skin and bones. And it was laying just on the side of the road. And it was literally 3 days, just skin and bones. Everything else had been taken,
That's just from the vultures.
Yeah. Right?
Right. So imagine if it's out in the woods, every other thing can take a bite out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I know. So those kind of questions, they have a surface level logic, but when you get down to all of the factors that we were just talking about,
right?
It's you're not going to find much of anything out there. And like you said, you just saw that one because it got hit by a car.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it came into human population and paid the price for it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and the other thing too is, I've always lived in a city. Mm-hmm. I've never lived in the country. I've never lived in the mountains or anything like that. And so, I can see everything. I know, what I mean? I can see, there's nothing really hidden from my perspective. And I think sometimes we forget that most of the United States is not like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You look at the size of Houston, mm-hmm. 4 million people in this area. Once you get out of the city, I mean, it's just flat land and forest, depending on which direction you go, you're either going to run into forest or you're going to run into just flat land and, hill country,
Atlanta's the same way. I mean, you can north, south, especially if you drive out of town north or if you drive out of town south, mm-hmm. after about 2 hours, you start looking around.
Right.
And my mother came from a really small town in South Georgia in the swamps called Waycross. And I tell people who don't know, you get down there around Macon, Georgia, which is 80 miles south of here. On 75 South, you look to your right, you look to your left, and all you see are trees.
Right.
That's it. Every now and then you'll pass a farm.
Right.
And then every other now and then you pass a gas station. Next gas, 48 miles.
Right. Yeah.
Start looking at the gas.
There you go. Yeah, start doing the math if you don't have one that tells you.
Right. So I mean, and the swamps. Oh my God.
Right. Yeah, it's like going to Louisiana. Once you get out of Texas, you cross over to Louisiana. I mean, just bridge after bridge after bridge after bridge because there's just so much swamp there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's so in terms of territory, in terms of geography, the idea that there are cryptids that are existing under the mainstream radar and only being encountered every now and then is, I mean, even on a logical level, that's highly plausible.
Right.
One of the things that, and I'm really interested in what's going on with this dogman creature. I know that you have sightings in Texas.
Right.
I know that there are sightings. There seem to be a lot of sightings in the southwest, and here in the southeast. What are your thoughts on this creature, and in terms of what you've read and heard and contemplated?
A lot of what I heard, people are convinced that it is a canine.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other end, I've heard people who are convinced that it is still a big, primate, much like a baboon,
Mm-hmm.
because of the snout.
Mm-hmm.
So I can, kind of get with that a little bit. I guess you could say, I can see it looking like a baboon. If
Mm-hmm.
a baboon was to be, 7-8 feet tall, it might look like a werewolf, because there are primates that do have that protruding snout.
Yes.
A canine, the only ones that really kind of freak me out with their stories are where they say it's on all fours, looks like a canine until it starts to stand up and it starts popping and clicking. Have you heard that? People talk about how it pops and it clicks. What do you think about that?
I've got several stories like that where the witnesses talk about that, hearing that, and it strikes me as odd for a number of reasons. Number one, that's a anatomical feature
Mm-hmm.
that the average person would not even know to make up if they were just going to tell a story.
Right.
So that's very fascinating. So I think that's actually what they're hearing. I think it lends itself towards the creature being some kind of canine, because a primate doesn't have to do that. I mean, if a chimpanzee wants to stand straight up, it doesn't have to go through any cracking and popping.
Right.
Or even, like you said, a baboon or a gorilla.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to go through any kind of anatomical adjustments that are not already there. A canine would.
Right.
And so, to me, that's an element of the story that gives credence in my mind to this being a real creature. Here's the thing this is very interesting to me. There's 2 points I want to make about what this thing might be. I know you've heard the name or familiar with Linda Godfrey.
Right. East of Bray Road, yeah.
Right. I think she was out on this thing first.
Yeah.
She was out. She's one of the first really people to speak out on this.
Yeah.
Years ago, she said that they had a technical remote viewer
Mm-hmm.
to analyze Dogman. And if you know how that works, you know that you can't tell them, tell me what a Dogman is.
Right.
Because you contaminate the research.
Right.
You just give them a set of coordinates. You know that's
right.
how it's. But this person said that this creature was extraterrestrial. It was not an Earth-born creature.
Right.
And when I heard that, I said, you know what? If this is a real thing, I can buy that. Mm-hmm. And the reason I can buy it is because there are no known examples in the fossil record of a bipedal canine.
Right.
Now, we may find one day, but there's no known example in our fossil record of a bipedal or a canine that has bipedal capability. So if there is one here that has that capability, it's not from here.
Right. Right. And you know what's funny about that?
Yeah.
When you mentioned that being extraterrestrial,
Mm-hmm.
Like in some of the ancient times, a dog man-like creature was considered an extraterrestrial. Some of the,
there are a lot of people who think that these creatures are what Anubis is based on.
Right. Right.
And other canine humanoid creatures that we see all back through folklore. You know, all through folklore and mythology, you know, and various traditions of ancient civilizations. And so, you know, if you dovetail all that together, you know, is he trying to get back? Did I hear Mike?
No, he would just
okay.
posted this.
I just made a comment. Okay.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, but I tell you that it scares me.
Right.
That Dogman issue scares the hell out of me.
And
just based on the stories.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Abe? Abe is saying shapeshifter.
Oh, there's you know, the thing about it is I've heard that a lot. Of course, we have a lot of indigenous traditions about like the skinwalker and what have you.
Right.
And of course, the same thing holds with the European version of what they call the werewolf.
Right.
Right. So my theory or my idea is I think that the skinwalker, I think that's a real thing. Mm-hmm. I think it's a real thing that, you know, relates to supernatural powers and those kind of energies. I think that's I think it's a real thing.
Okay.
I don't think it's the same thing as Dogman.
Okay.
I think Dogman is Dogman 24 hours a day.
Okay.
And I think because we have this similarity in construction, mm-hmm. like a werewolf is clearly canine. Skinwalker has canine features. Dogman has canine features. So Dogman is a skinwalker or werewolf. All of those can be real and be totally different things.
Right. Right.
So that's my take on it.
Yeah. You know, and when you mentioned that, it kind of goes back to the Bigfoot thing. Mm-hmm. People would say they see them jumping through a portal, or they see them, you know, disappear right before their eyes.
Right.
I think there's just multiple entities out there, you know.
Yes.
And, you know.
Right. Because that's a great point. That's a great point. I think the Bigfoot that we're concerned with,
right,
the one that's there, I think it's a flesh and blood animal because it's leaving footprints, it's leaving scat, it's leaving hair samples, it's breaking twigs, it's building shelters, it's, you know, doing all these, it's howling out in the forest.
Yeah, people have seen it attack animals, you know,
deer.
Yeah.
Right. However, I also think it's possible that there are like entities, mm-hmm. these kind of non-physical things out there that can manifest up any kind of way they want to.
Right.
And just show you, like, I know a story of a lady who talked about seeing a dog man in her house.
Right.
And I was like, no. And you're not even out in the woods. There's no dog man in your house. There is something, because I think this lady was kind of a dog man aficionado. Mm-hmm. Just, she loved the topic. Right. And so I think there's something in your house and it knows what scares you.
Right.
And it's showing itself to you as a dog man.
Right.
So I think you have like a really supernatural problem with something in your house. It's not a dog man. Because if dog man was in your house, you wouldn't be alive to make the report.
Right. Right. Yeah. And one of the interesting things that kind of got me on the thinking that there's multiple entities out there was one of my cousins was telling me, because he knew that I was into this Bigfoot thing, and he was like, man, because we all saw Bigfoot at his grandfather's property, which is outside, which is about maybe 2 hours north of Houston, a place called Madisonville. I said, really? You saw it? Yeah, because about 20 of us saw this thing walking through the woods. It crossed a little river, and it walked through the woods. He goes, and so we followed it. And he goes, it turned around, it looked at us, he goes, and it disappeared.
Yeah.
You know, and so I was like, what the heck is he talking about? But he said about 20 people witnessed it. You know, they were having a big party out there. Yeah, just vanished.
So that's interesting because, so let's imagine it's some kind of entity.
Right.
based on how you described it, it sounds to me like it was trying to lure somebody into the woods.
Yeah.
Because I've heard of this idea of these really dark negative entities. As an example, if it's in a house, you'll hear somebody call your name.
Yeah.
But it'll be like from the basement. And you know nobody's down there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But sometimes the voice will sound like somebody familiar to you.
Right.
Right? It's trying to isolate you. Because you run down to the basement and then you're cornered.
Right.
It's a trick. And what your story there sounds similar. Like it's going over here and it turned around to see if somebody was going to follow.
Right.
And then it just vanishes in front of 20 people.
Right.
Yeah. So it was trying to sucker somebody into going into the woods.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He said when it disappeared, they all stopped going. They were like, "Oh, hell no."
No. So nope. Well, what's funny is like, dude, I wouldn't follow it if it was like an actual Bigfoot.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you mentioned dark entities.
Mm-hmm.
It brings on to another subject that I'm interested in. I know I've seen you post some things about that, and it's black-eyed kids. What are your thoughts on that?
I'll tell you something. It's one of the scarier topics,
right?
Because I can't come up with any way that this is not something but straight up evil.
Right.
There's no positive spin I can put.
And all the people who have encountered this stuff don't walk away warm and fuzzy.
Mm-mm. Yeah. I mean, sometimes evil will approach you and try to trick you. These things aren't trying to trick anybody.
Yeah.
These are just straight, you know what I mean? And it's one of the scarier things that I have ever encountered. And this whole idea about like showing up at your door.
Yeah.
Or trying to walk up on your car.
Yeah, tap on your window and
ask
him to come in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even if it was just like a regular kid.
Right.
I'm like, hey man, what are you doing out here? Where are your if it's just a normal kid, I'm like, hey dude, where are your parents?
Right.
I don't know you.
Here soon. You remember that story?
Yes.
Our parents will be here soon.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't know. There's only I think it's some kind of really dark thing. I don't know what's behind it. But it seems really sinister, really dark, and I think it's really weird as to how they approach people and what that's really about. Michael's suggesting the vampires. Well, that's not that crazy because they seem to always have to ask permission.
Right.
And we know that's like part of the vampire lore.
Right.
And that's even scarier.
Right.
Yeah.
And trying to take something from someone as far as like their energy, it doesn't have to necessarily be blood, what I'm saying, but you're part of your soul, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I tell you what, they're not. I mean, in my mind, you're not getting blood. You're not getting. I'm not letting you in to get blood, soul, energy, or Coca-Cola, anything.
Right.
Yeah, because it's. But I do tend to think that old cosmic law about evil not really being able to get in unless you give it permission.
Right.
There's something about that just rings true.
Right. It's kind of creepy.
Well, it's very creepy, but I take it as a lesson for human beings that you have free will.
Right.
Like your existence is not guided by you're not a Muppet. Right? Your existence is guided by there's certain things, of course, that are out of our control.
Right.
But your existence is guided by your choices, your decisions, your free will. And even this other supernatural evil thing cannot really dominate you unless you let it.
Right.
And so that's, I look at it that way. I mean, I've certainly had encounters with things that I would call dark or demonic or evil.
Mhm.
And I am convinced that I'm here talking with you now is because I didn't buckle under.
Right. Yeah, that's
I
interesting.
was like, hell no, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
Let me ask you something real quick. Kind of, a little bit personal, but what
Yes.
does your wife think about all this when you talk about this stuff?
Let me tell you something. No, it's a super great question. And my wife is a second or third generation Cunandera.
What is that?
It is it in Mexico. It's similar to a shaman.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know exactly which of her predecessors. I don't know if it's his grandmother or aunts, but going back several generations, she inherited all that.
Okay.
So when I met her, she was already heavy and strong. Right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I've never had to like convince her of anything. And plus, not only that, she's had multiple encounters all throughout her life, and some of which I've actually done stories on some of her encounters. Except
Oh, wow.
like nobody knows that I'm talking about her,
Right.
right? Because I use different names. But I mean, terrifying.
Wow.
Because in her life, she's had dogman experience. She's had UFO experiences. She's had experiences with dark entities, really dark, crazy, funky, nasty things. And so, like around here, we never have conversations about, oh, is that real?
Wow. Okay.
It's all good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it sounds just like maybe she scares you more than you scare her.
So with a couple of those stories, a couple of those stories had me looking over my shoulder, because I was like, "Are you for real?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and she, yeah, very, 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 almost kind of like how like you see, like sometimes the stuff that happens, it's like in a movie,
Right.
and it's like, oh my god, because I could just see it happening if I'm sitting here watching it, and I'm like, "Are you serious?" Yeah, and so we have that connection of, and we go back and forth with stories. Well, when I was 18, I'm gonna tell you what happened, and then she'll say, "Oh yeah," so yeah, we don't have that in this house. Yeah.
Where's Shannon, Mr. Flight?
Oh no, she's sitting in the airport.
Yeah. Yeah. So like the woman that I'm dating, she didn't know anything about all this, so I could just scare her pretty good with some pretty good stories. I had her watching the Missing 411 the other day, and she
Oh my
was like,
God.
she was like terrified of that stuff. What are your thoughts on that? On people who go missing in forests? Do you think it's different entities, or do you think it's some? I mean, some of them just have to get lost, I guess.
Right.
But
Yeah. Well, of course, yeah. I think there's a lot of things going on. I mean, I think some people just fall victim to misadventure,
right,
and things like that. Die of exposure or things of that sort. But and of course, there's other known predators in the forest, and then there's also crazy people
right,
in the forest. But yeah, it is inconceivable. Some of these must be encounters with these unknowns,
right,
and because I know for 100% sure that they're out there. And I know that if they come into close proximity to human beings and things don't go right, you're not going to see that person again.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely think that. Yeah.
You got a question here from Mike.
What is the weirdest thing you have ever heard of an eyewitness in the woods? Yeah, right. Weird is hard, because this is all weird. The weirdest thing. I think the weirdest thing I've ever heard in a story, about something going on in the woods is territorial disputes between Dogman and Bigfoot,
Right.
which is, something I don't want any part of.
Right. You don't want to get in the middle of that. Yeah.
Right. But I have heard stories, and not only that, stories that of this issue that go back to Native Americans.
Right.
Who talk about, oh, this over here is Bigfoot territory, and this over here is Dogman territory, and our territory is right here, and everybody's kind of like this. And so the fact that dynamic is going on out there is terrifying.
Yeah.
And but like I said, not interested.
Right. I heard a encounter of a big male moose, a bull moose, and a big alpha Bigfoot.
Really?
Going at and a guy was in the middle of that fracas, and he said multiple times he thought he was going to get run over by these creatures, because they were just running at him, and the moose was trying to get away, and that he actually knocked the Bigfoot down. He kicked him in. You don't know if he kicked him in the chest or in the face, but he said he knocked him down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but he said the Bigfoot jumped over him. The moose came running at him. He said he was in the middle of all that.
Now, let me ask you something about a moose. Because, I don't think I've ever seen a moose even in a zoo. And on TV, you can't really get a true nature of their size. Right. Have you seen a moose in real life?
Not in real life.
Okay. Yeah. I know they're enormous.
Yeah, they're huge. Yeah.
So, and their antlers are just, yeah. And so I would imagine that a full-grown alpha moose would not be afraid to mix it up with a Bigfoot.
Right. Yeah.
I'd watch that.
Yeah. Yeah. You just don't want to be in the middle of it.
I mean binoculars.
There you go. Yeah. Way up in a tree somewhere.
But I'd watch that. Yeah. Wow. That's a great story.
Yeah. It's on one of Will Jevning's podcasts. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on orbs in the woods? That people see the orbs. Have you heard stories on that?
Yes. Yeah. You know what? I think that backs up into what we were talking about earlier. I think there's things out there.
Yeah.
I think that, for thousands of years, we have had stories about spirits of the woods, elementals, pixies, fairies, gremlins, goblins, puckwudgies, and what have you. I think all of those things. And when you get down, the Native Americans are very serious about puckwudgies, for example, especially up in the Northeast. And I think that it's all that. I think that the woods, the vast stretches of wood and forest land, are abiding with these kind of non-corporeal spirit energies. And we just talk about them in the names. We call them a fairy, or you call it a wood elf, or all of these names that have come down. If you go to the UK, they talk about trolls, and pixies. But because maybe these things manifest physically from time to time. But when we see orbs, I think that. We're just seeing the energetic representation of these things. Many years ago, when I was all concerned about like having a perfectly manicured lawn.
Right.
I got over that, by the way. I turned up. I got a tiller and I turned up all the soil, and just reseeded it. And pretty soon I had this like golf course looking perfectly green front yard. And I was so goofy and proud of it. I go out to the front porch and I snap a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And this was a digital camera. This was before phone cameras.
Okay.
So I had to USB it into my laptop and upload it.
Right.
I upload the picture. It's a perfect picture, except there's like 25 golden orbs just hovering in my front yard.
With some gnomes.
And I wondered if it was because I turned up the earth. I turned up all that earth.
Yeah.
and just kind of release this energy.
Right.
Yeah. It was amazing because I'm standing right there. I don't see anything. And even when I looked in the viewfinder, I didn't see anything in the viewfinder.
Yeah.
But it was only when I uploaded it. Yeah.
That is pretty interesting.
So yeah, it's real. I've seen orbs drain energy off people and they get drained. Wow.
Yeah.
That's well, all orbs aren't good.
Yeah.
Yeah. A red orb, like, isn't that interesting how like anytime something comes at you red, it's usually bad?
Right. You see red eyes.
Red eyes, yeah. Yeah. Red orb, I don't want to deal with that. Red orb. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So, we're running out of time here, but I did want to ask you something else.
Yes.
In terms of evidence, what are your thoughts on people who take pictures, which to me is fine, but then blow them up so much that they get distorted and blurred? Would you rather just see the original picture?
Yes. And the real problem is that now everybody's got a camera on their phone.
Right.
Number one. And the thing is, we're not all photographers.
Right.
It used to be only photographers had cameras.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But now everybody's got a camera. And so what we're getting is that we're just getting stuff. And I don't, and it doesn't matter how good your phone is. It doesn't. And blowing things up, outside of a photo lab.
Right.
And you just get this distortion and blobs. And so that's what we're dealing with a lot.
Yeah. And that's in any subject, whether it's paranormal, UFOs,
Yes,
Bigfoot, cryptids. Yeah.
Right. That's what's going on. We're getting everybody's just click, 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 and blowing it up. And I'm like, enlarging does not guarantee detail.
Right.
So that's what I think about that. It's not going to stop.
No.
That's
It's probably gonna get a lot worse, but
they'll be like, Joe said we shouldn't do that. It click, 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 click.
Yeah. I just think the people out there, if you want to take a picture, man, take a picture and leave it at that.
Right. At the size, the original file size, leave it there.
Yeah. Because I'll never tell anyone what they experienced or what they didn't experience or what they saw or what they didn't see. But if you blow a picture up so far it is distorted and I can't see it, then you get mad at me when I say, well, I can't see anything there. They're like, well, it's right there in front of you. Like, well, no, it's not.
But you were there. And so but that's the lesson here is that photos and videos are not the conclusive proof of anything.
Right.
That's it's an element of evidence, but it doesn't prove anything.
Would you rather see a picture or hear audio, in your own opinion?
Well, I'll tell you, that's a great question. I would love to hear audio. I like EVPs,
right?
Because of the difficulty in faking them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have to be a really world-class studio engineer, right? But it depends on what it is. I mean, obviously UFOs, I want to see that. Mm-hmm. But you talk about like a dog man howl or a Bigfoot scream. I would love to hear that because see, those are audio things that can be analyzed and can be demonstrated to not be this and it's not that and it's not that and it's not that. That can be done. Right. That can really be analyzed and measured. Yeah.
As especially like you're in the woods somewhere, against other known animals in this region.
Yeah. And not only comparison to other animals, but the frequencies.
Right.
For example, there's some frequencies that a human voice cannot do.
Right.
And so we can rule out somebody out there hoaxing.
Yeah. And it wouldn't matter if you're one of the three tenors or Mariah Carey.
No, there's a human parameter.
Right.
That can, unless you have the ability to overturn physics.
Right.
And then we need to talk. That's a whole nother show.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. It was great having you on.
Absolutely, it was a lot of fun. I like doing shows like this.
Yeah, man. And talking to you, man, the time goes by like that.
I know. That's
but it's real fun doing this show, and man, hopefully we can have you back on sometime soon again.
Hey, just shoot me a message. No problem.
And the guys in the chat room, man, thanks a lot. You had a lot of good comments there. The chat room was going, and just didn't have enough time to. You were talking. You had a lot of good information coming out. That's another thing I liked about having you on. Man, you got a lot of good information. That's right. And let's answer this one more question.
Do you think Bigfoot is a paranthrope? Well, if I had to, if I would guess that it is some derivative of something like a Gigantopithecus or one of the pre-Ice Age hominids or hominoids. So I don't think that's far off. I think it's something that has been here and we just don't know about it. Probably started in Asia, came across the land bridge during the Ice Age.
Cool. Yes. Well, cool, man. And with that, do you have any last words? If people want to reach out to you or
I just want to tell people, hey, I want you guys check out blackordermedia.net it's paranormal and cryptid horror story encounters. I do post them all over Facebook, and Michael runs them on his page, Cryptid Stuff and Cryptid Squads. I dropped a few, I think, on Beyond the Woodline. Okay. Let me know what you think about them because they're encounter stories that are really scary.
Yeah, they're really good. You dropped a lot of good stuff.
And so, and I appreciate that. And hey, man, thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
Cool, man. Thanks a lot, man. And hold on real quick. All right, guys, we'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks a lot.